What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And in today's video I'm actually going to be offering you something extremely different from my usual video, in the sense that in today's video I'm actually going to be ranking the Transformers Generations Titan class figures. Now you may be wondering as to how that is different, and the reasoning is because I've actually never ranked anything from the Generations line. And by the Generations line, I know the Studio series is a part of that now, but back in the day it used to be that the Generations line was our more classic styled figures, such as the G1 figures, the Beast Force figures, etc. So when I refer to it as a Generations ranking video, what I mean is that I'm going to be ranking the figures from the G1 cartoon series. Now in this video I'm going to be ranking all of the Titans from the very first one, that being Metroplex, to the most recent one in 2020, that being the Earthrise Scorponok. Now in this video I will only be reviewing the actual Titan figures, so I won't be ranking Predaking nor Devastator, as I do believe they are classed as Titan figures, but they're combiners, so they have flaws that some of the other figures can get away from, so they are going to be exempt from this list. So in this video I'm going to be ranking Metroplex, Fortress Maximus, Trypticon, Omega Supreme, and of course Scorponok. So without further ado, we're going to begin the ranking video, but first off I thought I'd start off with a really awesome piece of imagery here of Megatron and Optimus Prime when the battle is so fierce and is so harsh. The leaders of both the Autobots and the Decepticons have to call upon the Titans. So without further ado, let's call upon our first Titan. And so taking the 5th spot on my list and being my least favourite Transformers Titan class figure has to go to the Transformers Generations Fortress Maximus. Now I know there'll be many of you down in the comment section below being completely up in arms as to why I have ranked Fortress Maximus so low down in the list, and it's actually for a few reasons. One of the primary reasons is that I just think this figure is so lazy. Now I know this figure was released roughly around the same time as the Titans Return toy line, and personally I don't really think Hasbro knew where they were going with the Transformers line, so I don't think that they took it as serious as perhaps they would now with some of the more recent releases. And that is evident when you actually see how much reuse pieces this figure takes from the previously released Titan class Metroplex. This figure is merely just a remold, a very heavy remold I may add, of the Transformers Titan class Metroplex, which is just so lazy, as I'd say about 65%, 70% of the parts are just simply reused from that original Metroplex figure, and it really does show here with this release. This figure has no ankle rocker joints, and now I know this figure was released a long time ago, but I do believe it was released when Titans Return was released, so that is only 5 years ago, and there are just pieces on this figure that I really think shouldn't have been reused from that original Metroplex. Now I know that they share a rather similar design in the actual G1 cartoon, but I honestly really do hope that Hasbro and Takara actually redo Fortress Maximus and Metroplex for that matter later on down the line, as I believe they've almost covered all of the main Titans, so to go back and revisit Fortress Maximus and Metroplex I definitely think would be the right decision. Another reason why I don't necessarily like this figure too much is because I'm not entirely sure whether this is due to it reusing previous pieces from Metroplex, but the arms on mine are incredibly loose and floppy. They literally do not hold up whatsoever. The ratchet joints are gone in both of the arms, which I have no idea as to why that is, as that is how they were when I first opened this figure out of the packaging. The only redeeming aspect of this figure to me is the head sculpt and the fact that it actually has an electronic function. So just to demonstrate that, and it should trigger the LED light as well as some sound effects. They are honestly the only things that are actually redeeming for me, and the fact that it looks semi-decent just standing in a vanilla pose. Now I did pick up the SDCC version, so I do already have the sticker details already put on, and I do have the sword. If I'd picked up the original version which didn't include the sword, I probably would have been even more butthurt about this figure than I already am. So definitely for me, Fortress Maximus secures the 5th spot. Taking the 4th spot on my list goes to the Transformers Titan class Decepticon Trypticon. Now don't get me wrong, I actually think Trypticon is one of the better Titans, and the only reason why he takes 4th place is because the last remaining 3 that I have, I just think in terms of personal preference and just their overall designs appeal to me a lot more. But if I was more of a fan of the design of Trypticon, this figure probably would have been a lot higher up on the list, due to the fact that it's actually a really awesome representation of Trypticon. I actually do really like how this figure is very faithful to that G1 cartoon. I'm just not necessarily a huge fan of this figure, as it's very lumbering, it's very large. I do think that the tail is quite ugly. I wish that they could have done something with the tail and perhaps had added some extra hinge joints into it and just made it look slightly more G1 accurate. It is a very large block that just sort of hangs off the body, but the actual body, the head, the guns, the legs, I all think look awesome. I do believe that there was an issue with the ratchet joints in the legs. However, many years on, I haven't found to have any issues with the ratchet joints in the legs whatsoever, so I don't know whether that's just because I haven't really messed around with this figure too much or whether I just got lucky, but personally the build structure on this one does seem to have held up quite well over time, which is nice. I think that the details are really awesome. I think that it's probably one of the best detailed Titan figures today. I'm just not really a huge fan of Trypticon's design. I think that he looks rather obscure and I just don't think he appeals to me, but in terms of accuracy to the G1 cartoon, I think that they nailed it. They did a really good job, and as an imposing dinosaur Decepticon, I think that it does a really well done job. I do wish, however, that there was an electronic function. This figure definitely could have done that, whereas some of the other ones that are on the list couldn't have. This one definitely could have. I really wish that there was an electronic function in the head, perhaps, and lighter eyes, some sound effects. I really think that would have greatly amplified this figure in my opinion, and this was quite expensive, and this is one of the more smaller Titans as well, so it would have been nice if there was some sort of electronic feature, but nevertheless, it's still a really good figure, but not one of my favourites. It goes to the original, the OG Transformers Fall of Cybertron Titan class Metroplex. This was the first ever Titan class figure, and I believe one of the first G1 inspired figures that I ever collected, and I've got to say that even after I believe it's 8 years, this figure still holds up tremendously. This is one of my favourite Titan class figures, and whilst it may not be as agile and as articulated and as G1 accurate as some of the newer ones, it still really holds a very special place to me, as I stated, this was the first Titan class figure I'd ever picked up. This is the oldest Titan figure that I own, and I really do think it's a fantastic figure. The plastic feels great, it was a very considerable price point, it does have electronic features, and it also has articulated eyeballs, which I believe is the only time we've ever got that with a mass release Transformer, and after all those years, this figure still really does hold up very well. Now, with all that being said, this was based more on the Fall of Cybertron video game. Once again, this was before the days of where Hasbro began the War for Cybertron trilogy, so this isn't as accurate to G1 as perhaps it could be. I do definitely believe that they are going to revisit this one, possibly next year, or if not the year after, as next year we have Unicron coming out. But definitely I think this is one that we're going to see revisited within the next 2 years, so that'll be awesome to have an updated version of Metroplex. But as it stands now, still a really awesome Titan, towers over all of them. I do believe he's the largest, he's even bigger than Fort Max, so none of them have really ever topped Metroplex in my opinion. It had the build, it had the electronics, it had everything. I even thought its alt modes were really well done as well. So definitely third spot has to go to Metroplex. Taking the second runner-up spot as being one of my favourite Titan classes, this has to go to the most recent Transformers Earthrise Titan class Scorponok. This really was a very close contender for the first spot. However, the first spot, which I imagine you can probably guess now, just had that slight edge over this, but this one truly is really well done. This could potentially move to the first spot, judging how my opinion goes over time, but this is a really solid looking figure. I think the colour scheme looks amazing, it's incredibly faithful to the G1 cartoon. I think the articulation on this is probably the best we've ever got for a Titan class. This truly is just as articulated as some of your smaller figures. It's got waist joints, ankle rocker joints, all the joints that you could possibly ever imagine. So definitely really well articulated, and it's one of the largest Titans that we've had since Fortress Maximus. It's bigger than Omega Supreme, and it's bigger than Trypticon, and it's bigger than all of the Combiner figures. It really is a very large piece, and I think it looks awesome. The head sculpt is fantastic. The fact that it can transform into Zarak is super cool. I just hope that they do release a Generation Select black version of Zarak, but overall there's not much else I can say. A really solid looking figure, and out of all of the Titans, this is my preferred Decepticon one. So of course, that means taking the first spot and being my favourite out of all of the Titans goes to the Transformers Siege Omega Supreme, and oh wow, this figure is a fantastic release. This figure looks amazing in his robot mode, and very similarly to Scorponok, it has all of the articulation. As I stated, when Hasbro started the War for Cybertron trilogy, I really think that they began putting out some of their best figures that they'd had released in years, and this is definitely a product of that. This one is fantastic. It has some amazing play options in robot mode. The claw is awesome, the articulation is fantastic, the overall detailing, the faithfulness to the G1 cartoon is really well done, done, and all of the sculpted in detailing that it has is truly remarkable. But not only is this figure really fun in robot mode, he's incredibly fun in vehicle mode, which is something I can't say for some of the other figures, hence why Scorponok didn't make it into the first place. This figure is a modular base, so essentially it splits up into different components. You have a tank, you've got a rocket, you've got an entire battle station, all of which I think makes for an incredibly fun play experience, and even as a collector, it's fantastic to pose this figure in a few different options. This one here just has so much versatility to it. I really do think it's one of the best, and it's actually one of the more smaller ones as well, although it feels incredibly substantial, but due to it being slightly smaller, it is a lot easier to handle, meaning that it's a lot more enjoyable to play with, hence why it topped the first spot. So definitely Omega Supreme. If you haven't got him in your collection, I highly recommend him. So that was my ranking video for the Transformers Titan class figures. Do you agree with my list? I thoroughly enjoyed making this video. So if you are interested in me making some more ranking videos for some of the Earthrise and Siege figures, definitely be sure to let me know down in the comment section below, as this is really the first time I've ever ventured into doing ranking videos for figures other than the movieverse. As stated, I think that all of the Titan class figures are really well done, other than the exception of Fortress Maximus. I just really don't like that one whatsoever. But these two, Omega Supreme and Scorponok, are by far the best two that we've gotten so far. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you agree with my list, please let me know down in the comment section below. And until my next video, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.